Hey there, this is Alex. We're going to do another Alex James Hislop diary entry. This is going to be Alex James Hislop diary entry content, October 5th, 2019. For guys. So, September we did a review content, and one of the things that's been happening on my end is an analyzation and looking at the impact in regards to some of my actions. I can discern some of the spiritual conversation to have been about that. And one of the things looked at was regular actions throughout the day, and this idea that somehow if I brush my teeth, if I go to the washroom, if I have hygiene, if I sleep, if I do a bunch of regular actions, and the amount of spiritual impact and augmentation regarding behind the scenes for some of it. That's been some of it, and it wasn't necessarily the problematic, but if you would take that alone and take a look at how much spiritual activity and things that people get just off of the baseline actions, like going to the washroom, going for a walk, that sort of thing, you would say that there might be a bit of a problematic. The difficulty is that it's not just about those actions. So, for example, some of the spiritual economics, some of the things I'm talking about. So, brush my teeth, all of a sudden in the spirit realm, a couple regular things that some would equate to brushing with teeth happen, but also in like big ways. Like all of a sudden there's some huge big in the sky that gets his teeth brushed and everyone's happy. That's some of it. That's some of the stuff I'm talking about, but there's other kinds too, which is, I brush my teeth, I get like a lump of treasure, spiritual transferring of money. That's like, you'd look at it, you'd be like, is this really what's supposed to be? He brushes his teeth and he gets this much money. And of course, then there's probably a certain kind of amount of reputational defense being employed in a certain kind of manner, some of it having to do with certain kind of stealings. So the way some of the spirit work in regards to negative the more brimstone cultures, a good way of holding it down is, so this is one of them. You sort of would see a transfer of, let's say, $10,000, and that $10,000, it was really only about $3,000. That's sort of like, so it's like, well, why would you transfer 10,000 if you're only meaning to transfer 3,000? And then there's this idea that, something happens. Oh my God, someone stole $7,000 out of that bank account. My God. Or maybe $5,000 and then another $2,500 to figure out who the heck done it, and leaving you with $3,000 exactly. So that was supposed to be the amount that you transferred, but there's this holding it down, reputational defense kind of stuff, and payoffs that are sometimes done in a stealing and thieving fashion. That is some of it, but it's not. It's one of the examples, because there's other kinds too. It's not just about monetaries; it's about other stuff as well too. So there's some people who aren't in the loop and understanding in regards to some of that stuff, myself included, in regards to some of it. And the problematic is that we'd see certain things take place where it'd be like, oh, well, now $9,000 out of the bank account gets taken away, and then you have to pay $500 to figure out what the heck happened, leaving you with $500 when the payment should have been $3,000. So you start to see like, okay, so was that supposed to happen? No, it wasn't supposed to happen in a certain context, unless it was. But then there are those ones where it doesn't, and it's not supposed to happen. So regardless of whether that's one of them or not. And someone's still, this isn't about brushing teeth. You get $10,000 for brushing teeth. It still is, but it's just explaining a certain kind of thing in regards to certain spirit, that they consider a certain kind of action augmentation in regards to certain actions, partially from entertainment. You could see a whole storyline in the spirit play out, where then you jump into like a hologram program, and you're like this detective in 1940s, and you're like, what the heck's going on? What's happening, Bugsy? That sort of thing. And it's like, you try to track down this money, and you got to pay a bunch of money. By the time it's all done, the storyline all unfolds, and it's entertainment. And then you get back, it's like, okay, 3,000 in the bank account, except it wasn't. It was 500, and it wasn't supposed to be 3,000. It was supposed to be 2,000. And that's the truth. Anyway, that's one of some of those things that happens to a certain degree, where I think there's just some normal folk in the mix. Like, why do we have to go all this direction? Why am I dressed up in a 1940s mobster outfit right now? That's kind of how people feel at times. And I think some say too damn bad because they point towards something below, and it's just like, okay, so that's partly why I'm doing this right now. So yeah, but yeah, some of the action economics. So that's just some of the culture, though. That's some of the culture let knows. And then in the mix, you have certain kinds saying that it's supposed to be something that it's potentially not. That sort of thing that says that, on one side, those aren't, those aren't legit. That's real thieving. And they really go after it like it's thieving. In regards to some of it, and you'd be like, okay, listen, like that's where we're supposed to, let know of certain things in a certain discreet manner, and those let knows in regards to what kind it is, what kind of exchanges they are, is not being respected to a certain extent. It's one of those things that's should be, and in certain areas is, but not for everything. Like, is that are we literally going to say here that that is respected? Like, that's the case of this. Is this what this is? Are you going to sit there and say that? No, exactly. Because it's not at times, and it should be, but that would be correct. I'm not speaking to, like, this is the case. I'm speaking to a fictional character, good sir. And people eventuating my communications to reflect that it isn't, is one of those things. Okay, well, it's one of those things. But the taking out of context is the other one. So we talk about people who go after people legitimately, in regards to certain kinds of payoffs. Again, that sort of thing where you're supposed to, receive $2,000, and the $8,000 in regards to a certain payment is supposed to go towards something else, and it's supposed to look a certain way. So, it's in holding it down in regards to brimstone culture is understood. But then there's that sort of one which says, well, where are those payments going? Again, that other 8,000 in regards to it, where is it heading off? Again, there's been questions, and let knows as to, so where is that? Is it just fool's gold? Is it something else? It's a good question, and it's been one of the lines that says that that hasn't at times been respected, because it depends. Again, where's that money going? What's it going towards? And what does that mean? So there's probably extended storylines in regards to others pertaining to that 8,000, where there's supposed to be maybe a $500 payoff or payout, whatever you call that, to somebody who's researching certain things in a certain context. And this is a fictional example, all right. But it is one of those things where, again, if that payout doesn't happen, that's one of those things that's considered to be not respected in a certain context pertaining to that sort of dealings and things of that nature. And I know some people might be looking, it's like, why do we have to do it that way? Okay, well, if immorality culture exists behind the scenes, imagine that instead of having your money stolen outright, so you get paid like $3,000 and someone just comes by and steals all of it, that some of the idea in dealings in accords regarding that sort of thing was that, oh, well, you get your money and you get that $3,000 or $2,000, whatever it is, and then another 7,000 plays out, and all you got to do is play like a certain kind of storyline, 1940s get up kind of detective story, and there's other a couple other payouts in regards to it. They get their money, you get yours, great coverage plans provided, and that sort of thing works out. And the reason why it can be entertainment is because the kind of storylines that we can come up with in multiple regards, I feel like that is one of them. And I think that some people underestimate certain kind of immorality culture and what they like, and like what they like to see in regards to certain things. There's a certain kind that say, oh, well, they won't like to see certain things. I'm like, well, if it's a better alternative in regards to certain things, it might still be a decent, and you might see them just be like, what, it might be the better way of it. But it still matters in regards to providing violence and that sort of thing. Don't underestimate that, because that is not to be underestimated to a certain degree. So, but another one is that sort of stuff where certain kind don't necessarily. So on one hand, you have that sort of thing that says certain spirits go after certain kind, like it's a real thing taking, like someone really stole that $7,000 when it's not, because in the mix you have certain kind who are stealing certain money. So this is a part of it. That's just the other side where it's like, okay, so you get paid $2,000, and then there's another $8,000 in the mix, but so you got paid $10,000, and someone just comes along and steals most of the money, leaving you $1 in the bank account. And you're like, okay, that's not supposed to be what it is. That's not supposed to be how it works. And it's one of those things where you'd see certain kind of real stealings in the mix, which is also augmenting that sort of thing on another side, which is seeing certain kind really go after certain people when the payout was decent, when there was, and it really, some of it really has to do with displaying that, oh, well, it was this certain kind, it was a certain kind where we wanted to set it up a certain way, on having to reveal a certain kind of variable that kind of ruins certain kind of reputational defense. That is one of them, but it's not the only one. And you know, it's just what is the answer to that? What's the reasoning? Because that's why, because they don't like that there's a certain kind that can do it a certain fashion that's decent, Alex. That's all. That's what it is always about. Anyway, that's some of the stuff I'm talking about. But it ties into some of it in regards to action economics. You start to see certain kind of actions happening in regards to certain actions, and you will know and note that actions in regards to famous people, even in the physical, garner a different kind of reaction than those who are sometimes considered not. So again, you know, if you see a certain star, famous person walking through the park, you might see some people gawking or like going up to him, asking for autographs, whatever it may be. And if it was a regular person, you're not going to see that kind of reaction. So in that context, we understand there to be different action economics pertaining to famous people. Now, spiritually speaking, some have labeled me that to a certain extent. And this is where those certain physicals watching this, it's like, really, you know, you could just, and it is, I can feel it right now. But it is one of those things where I've noticed certain spotlight. I've noticed certain kinds of interaction within my process. So I think that there is a fame element in regards to some of the spirits within my process. Well, all right then. So we see within that sort of idea of action attachment. So again, I go brush my teeth, and all of a sudden there's just a bunch of different actions happening behind the scenes. So said to be because me brushing my teeth, that in front of the scenes, tethering of actions, in which does sort of, there is a knocking at the door as to disparities. Sure, there is. There's people behind the scenes that would like certain in front of the scenes attachments to a certain degree. It's one of those, there is a bit of a disparity there, and people do need to take a look at it, I think. But what we started noticing is that certain kind of baseline judgments, justice, you know, resolutions, decisions made in regards to this process pertaining to certain kinds of actions would sort of be augmented in a certain kind of way, and also change. Again, you have a certain kind of decision in a certain kind of justice system, and something said like, okay, so we're going to choose that it's a baseline across the board in regards to, you know, that person's process, and it's going to be a certain kind. But then there's this sort of talking point where it's like, okay, but you know what happens, you know what takes place, and for some of it, they don't say that. For some, they just say that's what it is. If you come up with alternatives, and for some of them, then that's your prerogative in a certain sense, you know, documentation and all that sort of stuff provided, etc. But some don't do it that way either. Again, some of it is just, that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that baseline. If it doesn't reflect, then you know, where do they go? Spirits know, the authorities, I mean, for guys, you know where to go with that. Happens to do with, for some, looking inward. Well, if you're the authority, then that's also, you know, I don't know what to tell you. A certain kind of authority. All right, well, granted, in the ways, means, for guides indicated. I just wanted to say granted. Anyway, what was next? So it wasn't just about like brushing teeth, though. I have a set of things throughout my day that I'd like to do. I'd like to write my book. I'd like to write my websites. I'd like to do some fiction writing. This is one of them. Advocations, organization, also content creation. So again, I'm creating an Alex James Hislop diary entry content. So this would be one of those things that we'd consider in regards to my actions to be on that list of, okay, so he's creating some content, that's decent. Another one had to do with specific content creation having to do with tarot card reading. There's a bunch of other ones too, reading books, reading spiritual books, near-death experience research, Questions to the Spirit. This is a certain kind of document that I'm working on. There's a bunch of other things that do have a ripple effect and impact already in a certain context, set up for some of it entertainment, some of it having to do with interaction. Again, if I'm going to work on writing and learning how to write, then having a certain kind of writing teachers, in the mix in a certain context is fairly decent. And that one's been fairly decent in a certain manner. Again, if I'm going to just copy over a certain kind of text that's on the one book, then it's basically just going to be copying over. But there is still things in there in regards to teaching that is decent and needed, I think, to a certain degree, specific to behind-the-scenes informational placement. But again, so that's some of the stuff that on top of like just regular. That's some of the stuff on my end that we saw. And I think this past 5 days, 6 days, we already took a look at something. One of the specific actions in regards to my process, one of them having to do with going for a walk, another one having to do with standing on Earth. Again, when you stand on Earth, there's a certain kind of interaction that takes place. A certain kind of spirit is potentially interacting in a certain kind of way, and also updates in regards to Earth. Again, you walk barefoot on Earth, and there's going to be certain kind of spiritual updates potentially, depending on who you are, as well as certain actions take place. So it was one of those things where we saw the one day that I had, I took a trip into town, I went for a walk, I attended a psychic webinar, and then I stood on Earth. Now, those 4 actions, we saw what it was, and we saw what it was before. We saw what it was again, and we're like, what is going on here? A drive, going for a walk into town, attending a psychic webinar, and then standing on Earth, and the amount of impact spiritually that had happened was quite surreal. And again, it had to do partially with that sort of baseline stuff that says there's a certain baseline that's supposed to happen in this process, certain kind of way of approaching, certain kind of interaction, and then some take a look at it and say, okay, well, instead of that, because we're unable to operate, every time you walk on Earth, when you walk on Earth, there's going to be a certain kind of impact instead. So instead of having that baseline all the way throughout his process, when he steps on Earth, there's going to be a certain kind of impact, which he doesn't always step on Earth. But then there are those days that he steps on Earth for like 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. If it's one of those, then some people were saying, hey, then it's one of those. And this is one of those things where I would look at it and be like, very good. Let me step on Earth for 8 hours, because that would be really awesome if there's this large impact that's somewhat decent to a certain degree. But again, we'd see that that's a part of it. Those baselines being sort of just someone taking a look at it and saying, no, we can't have that baseline be happen. What's baselines? What are you talking about baselines? A certain kind of interaction taking place. Like, so for example, always having a certain kind of teacher and teachers within this process. So something's decided in regards to then just say, okay, so it's just supposed to be that, and there's supposed to be certain teachers within this process teaching and that sort of thing, which lends towards a wide manner of knowledge creation and information, to a certain degree, specifically in regards to certain spotlight. You have a teacher, letting know of certain things and teaching about things with a spotlight that's, in regards to a certain kind of famous that is seeing some of the information that's being created, can be decent. It can be decent in multiple regards. Okay, then fine. Which there is that in a certain context. There's that sort of thing that says that, oh, well, we want to move him away from the process as per those process alternative accords and all that sort of stuff. And this is the case of this. All right, then fine. You don't know what it is, though. You've been wrong on that. Have I been wrong on that? For freak's sake, maybe. I don't know. Well, that's why. You lose when you... This is the case, Liz. Well, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, it's one of those things where we'd see a certain kind of impact take place that is like I was being shoehorned dimensionally high in the sky. I felt like I was floating high above everybody. But it was as soon as I went for that drive, because there had already been something about that I hadn't went for regular walks to a certain degree. Someone's stacking a certain kind of thing where when I go out, for that drive, when I go, my parents drove me right to the pipe shop, and we went in there, and someone even said that the last time I'd been here, there was already something crazy taking place too, and then they tried to augment that, tried to attach that to this certain kind of impact that was taking place in regards to this process. And you're really like, what kind of impact? What are you talking about? Okay, so there's a certain thing that I'm able to feel as a psychic medium, that when there's certain turbulence taking place, when I'm being shoehorned dimensionally out of the area, when I'm moving high up in vibration, and I'm like, whoa, what is going on? Like, because if I get high up in vibration to a certain spot, I start to look around saying, what is going on here? It's this high impact. I mention a subject, that subject is impacted in a certain time frame kind of stuff to a certain degree with some of it. And it isn't in regards to a certain kind of interaction system to potentially be able to facilitate that sort of impact that was supposedly supposed to happen. So, of course, I went for a walk, and that walk wasn't just a regular walk. It was a walk towards a certain kind of review area, which is already has a certain kind of turbulence in it in and of itself. So going for that drive, but the drive was potentially more turbulent, so it felt not turbulent, but it felt like my process changed rapidly, and I was in a certain spot where if I did an advocation in regards to a certain subject, they might have received a large sum of resources. And it's that sort of stuff. But again, not necessarily in regards to recompense pertaining to the kind of bad stuff that happens, in regards to if I was to do a certain kind of advocation in regards to resources pertaining to that subject. So I'd go to that review and I'd run it down. And it always felt like there was some larger spirit kind of reviewing things there in a certain sense. I basically let know what was going on in regards to September, at least a good portion of it, from it chapter 2 week to the Sask trip to a bunch of other stuff that was happening, and a lot of stuff that was a lot of different interactions stuff. Every day there'd be something you can point towards that was fairly interesting, I guess is what you would say. Certain kind of happenings, like you'd know that there's something happening in a certain sense. So again, then I'd go to and attend a psychic webinar meeting, which again, or there's updates when I attend those kind of webinars to a certain degree. All right, then fine. And so that sort of update kind of happened in regards to AREI and myself and others to spirit guides for some of it, at least in regards to that kind of meeting, that infrastructure, what I was sort of trying to attend. So there was already a certain kind of certain spirits seeing me, interacting. Again, being outside the house, there is a natural kind of thing in regards to when you go for a walk, when you travel outside the city, when you leave the country, that sort of thing. It kind of felt a bit like that, but more contained. Again, if I was to leave the country, someone might have lost his shit. I think so. Then I stood on Earth for 15, 20 minutes, and that was it. There was something huge happening. Again, what was said to have happened was that a certain spirit of mine in higher in higher dimensions, in other dimensions, gained access to a higher infrastructure in regards to certain kind of interaction. That was sort of what was said to a certain degree. So I don't know. And again, it's that sort of traversing outside. Well, instead of having those baselines throughout this process where it's just understood to be a certain thing, like if you take a look at the spiritual behind the scenes and what they're displaying, what mean spirit guides indicated, what it's supposed to be in regards to what's, partially for some of it to be agreed upon, if not most of it, pertain to what they're pointing out. And some say they can't operate with that sort of thing. So instead of that, it's that sort of thing that says, next time you go for a walk, there's just going to be high happenings and you're going to be moving up dimensionally quickly. And instead of having that baseline throughout this process regarding certain things, like having certain teachers within the process or a certain kind of informational display or, all manner of different variables that have been pointed towards, and some of it not. My main spirit guides and others, some divine marine spirit guides, take a look at some of the alternatives and say, okay, so we're supposed to be at this mediation or these kind of mediations in a certain sense, because if we're not, then something takes place where certain recompense in regards to some of those baselines not being heard is not given at all in a certain sense. So some of it, marine spirit guides and spirit guides try to attend in a certain manner. But I've been going my direction the way marine spirit guides indicated in the original light to a certain degree. And it's one of those ones where I think for other aspects of this process, main spirit guides and main guides being and attending there, is still worthy and it's still decent. Again, we're supposed to choose certain things pertaining to the recompense instead of having that baseline and certain variables in regards to what's done. Again, Alex brushes his teeth. All of a sudden, he gets a little bit more rather than a certain baseline happening. So you can see how some of that starts to sort of roll up and snowball into itself, specifically if some of it was already shoehorned on some of those actions pertaining to, going out for a drive or going for a walk or whatever it happened to be. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, me actually driving into town is probably a massive one to a certain degree. Or because I don't drive. I don't have my license. So if I was to do that, it would be one of those ones that. Because spiritually speaking, there's stuff that happens when some people drive. I think I'm already behind the scenes. I don't know. I don't know if I'm driving or not behind the scenes spiritually. I think probably have. I don't know. You got to speak to my main spirit guides. I'm not certain on that. But yeah, that's some of the stuff we talked about. And on the September 30th. So yeah, September 30th, September 29th, those were some two big days. The 30th, I recorded the review content, and there was a really good buffer that I didn't feel certain things happening to me. I didn't hear of certain things, but there was a certain look to me the one time and multiple kinds that said that is not, it can't be. It just can't be. And it partially has to do with some of the events that are happening within this process to a certain extent. But you know what? I don't like that line. There's someone who said, oh, well, that's why we want certain events being let know and understood to a certain degree, which laments upon a disparity in regards to chronicling, in regards to writing down information. Is that what it's supposed to be? The let knows of the information that's been happening in my process. And there's some chroniclers who look at it and say, that's a fucking problem. That is a problem. So it can't be about that. All right, you don't know why. You went there on it. Kind of. Because it is interesting stuff, and it does help. But, like somebody said, right? I mean, some of it's just facilitated and, to a certain degree to be able to say something, to be able to write something down for some of it. So you have that, in the mix to a certain degree. But some of it is really happening. Some of it's let knows about certain events that are taking place. And that sort of thing that says that, let's not let know of certain kind of events that are taking place because, upon his review at the end of the month, it's not going to be as turbulent. Why does it have to be turbulent anyway? It got less to do with that, more to do with this sort of thing that says, we'll deal with it during review, end of month, and, stacking it there and then having this huge mess, to a certain degree, nothing to do with me writing down the events to a certain extent. That sort of thing that says, oh, well, it would have been a problem anyway. If you didn't write it down, they wouldn't have had to go through all these hoops anyway. It's like, well, that's not my freaking problem. It isn't. That should not be like that. Me writing down certain things in my diary entry and events that I've experienced and things that happen to me, some of which are negative. That being said, it's somehow me, recounting that sort of stuff that says a bunch of people have to be forced to do something horrible when I don't want that to have happen. When some of this is me writing down certain negative events that happened to me, and then to say that that's the huge turbulent thing that needs to take place during that review because of that. I don't know what, like, it reeks. If it really does. All right, well, whatever. That's how I feel about it. All right, there is an incredulity in regards to some of it, and it really does. I don't know why it has to be. Look, you take a look at the alternatives, because that is it. It's like, okay, why did this guy have to, go streaking for like 10 days or whatever it was? And it's like, okay, well, it's an alternative regarding certain things. A certain spirit was being merciful, and instead of going into a pit of people who are just going to beat him up for 10 days, he decided to just let the guy go streaking for 10 days. And that's the thing. That's a fairly decent punishment alternative to a certain extent for what's acceptable. Well, that'd be why. Imagine if that's imagine if that's it. Well, no. See, that's not good enough for me. That was one of those things understood this past couple of days. Was that sort of thing that says, oh, yeah, imagine that, for your punishment, Alex, you had to view the dudes, you had to view that guy streaking for 10 days straight. And it's that sort of upper class disparity, I guess, to a certain degree. But still one of those things that's like, yeah, you know what? But I don't know if I want to experience that. Like, I'm one of those people who's like looking at happiness and wanting to experience life. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to experience any shitty things. And I don't want to have to do it to a certain degree, if that's how I feel about it. I want those that mean spirit guides need to be saved, because there's a certain kind of saving culture that's like, look, you just go streaking around your neighborhood for like 10 minutes, you save thousands, hundreds of thousands, and potentially billions of spirits. And it's one of those things where I take a look at it and I'm like, well, you know, I don't know, I don't want to go streaking to a certain degree. I want those spirits to be saved. Why don't you just save those spirits anyhow? All right, well, that would be correct. But you also take a look at the opposite of it, that sort of thing that says, okay, but what happens in regards to the negative, in regards to if I go streaking around my neighborhood for 10 minutes, and you do see certain things. Google. Hey, Google, stop. You can do that. Hey, Google, do what means spirit guides negated around this market fishing extension bonus, you guys. What you guys negated? Hey, Google, thank you. right on the money. Well, that was the thing of this. That was the case of it. So that's why. That would be why it is. Yeah, well, that, I guess, to a certain degree. But yeah, it's that sort of thing where we also saw certain economics in regards to certain actions, that sort of thing where it's like, I'm about to eat the last bite of my toast. And there are certain moments where, regardless of whether he eats that last bite of toast or not, there's going to be someone getting attacked in spirit. And so and it's not always about that. Sometimes it's about positivity. It's like, regardless of him eating that bite of toast or not, there was going to be a bunch of spirit who were going to be saved, or a bunch of spirit who were going to receive positivity, or there was going to be a bunch of decent things happening. And you know, it does. It speaks about that sort of thing. And in regards to story, it's like, you look at a story that doesn't have a certain kind of conflict, and what exactly, you know, what does that mean? You don't know why. That's how some have viewed it at times. But I think that it's wrong. I think there is a certain kind of storytelling that, if we understood it, we would look at it in a different manner. It just needs to be explained, you know, a page of writings or one sentence. And if we saw that information, we would be like, whoa, the honor of good sir. Well, all right, the honor, yeah. The honor of being able to pursue story like that in a certain context, because there's a certain culture that's based upon a certain kind of entertainment. I think we like to see certain kind of entertainment, and we like to see certain violence within certain content. We like to see certain conflicts take place. Again, it's like you read a detective's novel, you know, who got, you know, and that's it's one of the questions. And if we take a look at the percentages, there's a decent sized percentage that says somebody got, and that's the case of it. That is a tell, but you know, it doesn't always have to be about that, you know, to a certain degree. Maybe it's a guy looking through pretty much the entirety of the detective office's cases. And I ain't gonna, but that's the thing of it. Well, okay, but somebody got, Alex. I'm telling you. All right, that's the case. You're gonna find some. Well, that would be true. And it's one of those concepts that for a certain story, it would be different. It would look different. It wouldn't necessarily be cases about people who got attacked for some, or certain conflict taking place, but rather something else. What if we looked at conflict as non-conflict in a certain context pertaining to story creation? So instead of looking for the conflict in regards to story, what would it be that we look for the non-conflict and base the story around that? So someone receiving like a large amount of money and what to spend it on. You know, the entire, like, that's perfect. There you go. That's one of those stories. And you'd see, well, like, maybe it's a life journey sort of thing where he starts to figure out, like, you know, what jives and what doesn't. But again, is there going to be no conflict in regards to what he chooses or how he proceeds in life, or that sort of thing, or what he buys? Maybe you see it start to reflect something different near the end. He starts to give more money away, or starts to, you know, finds his purpose. You know why? Because that's how we all felt. This was the case. Listen, you don't know why. What's the case? You don't. The case was that these guys were trying to say this, but that was the thing of it. Okay, then fine. That's how Alex feels. This is the case. Listen, I'm not gonna forget. That's all. And to be quite honest, not mention that, I like mentioning that for a reason, because maybe I can say that, maybe, but hey, it's one of those things where if spiritually, maybe I'm not being attacked. Maybe my friends and family isn't being attacked as what's been insinuated at times. So spiritually, there has been let know of that sort of thing, and I know there's spiritual guides attest in regards to what Mean Spirit guys need regarding Mean Spirit guys need. It's one of those tells. And certain spirit, again, one of the lines in regards to this is moving off of that and focusing on positive and that sort of thing. But it can be difficult to focus on positive when there's a history regarding, when there's past 5 years of this process has predominantly been at times a bit of a channeling through, let know that some guy's getting attacked and that sort of thing. Not only that, but the power that I hold in a certain manner, regardless of how Tinseltown and beaten down it's been to a certain degree, still remains. And it's one of those things that I just walk away from those who can benefit from my advocations. Again, I am in a certain spot. I'm below certain thresholds. I'm a physical. There is natural ones in regards to being physical to a certain extent, in which I don't like lamenting upon to a certain degree, which says that do I just again, advocations, people look towards and say, is that the problem? And if you save some behind the scenes in regards to certain advocationals, and there can be some who don't like that. And those who don't like that then sometimes join my anti-camp and certain spirits working against me to say, hey, this is the case of it. But, there's got to be a big cover-up in regards to that sort of garbagios. I think some have looked at the cover-up to a certain extent. I haven't mentioned it too much, that sort of thing. It says there might be certain spirit who were perched in regards to a certain process. Then I do an advocation. That process gets affected, and they say, oh, well, that's why we're working against him again. And there's those ones where it's like, Alex James Hislop again? My God. And it's just like, I don't know. Like, there is more of a doubt in regards to that, where, because maybe it has to do with placement to a certain degree. Again, if a person's not supposed to be in this process, and you put them in a process that 5 minutes later I'm going to be doing an advocation in regards to, what is that considered? I don't know. I don't know. It's might be a way back in. I don't know. Again, we talk about baseline, and one of those baselines, somebody's just supposed to be banished from this process, and then 5-10 minutes later, we see them come back and emerge back in. We're seeing these alternatives to the justice system and judgments and non-justice systems that are ruling in regards to this process to a certain degree. And it's supposed to be understood that that's what it's supposed to be. Hey, if that sort of stuff takes place and you do those sort of alternatives, and then right, it's just one of those things where it's just like wells. I don't know. It begins, especially when it looks a certain kind of fashion. That is correct. Well, for say, you don't. It has less to do with me not respecting certain kind and more to do with something else. Again, if I don't adhere to certain kind of justice and non-justice systems in regards to certain things, that's my choice. Again, you think about what you adhere to in a certain manner, and is there some stuff that you don't adhere to? I'm fairly certain there is. All right, fine. Well, all right, fine. You don't know why, because that's the case of this. So, I mean, at a certain point in time, if something's ruled like, oh, I'm supposed to get a certain kind of defense team, and all of a sudden that defense team just goes and does its own thing because there's a certain kind of switching up or a route or a certain kind of thing where that baseline is just not respected, then what do I have to respond with? How do I respond? And what if it's vice versa? If I'm doing something like saving somebody in front of the scenes to a certain degree, and it's interesting that a certain kind of defense team could say, hey, what if we're trying to save somebody to a certain degree? And what if I'm trying to save somebody to a certain extent? Is that why we traverse those boundaries and not listen to certain kind of judgment and justice at times? But it's something else. It has something to do with something else. Again, it'd be like, it's going to be ordained that there's going to be a certain kind of battle that takes place in a certain spot. And after the kind of culture that I come from, I would look at it and say, all right, is there going to be a certain kind of warfare take place? But the way they can feng shui it is that warfare doesn't have to take place. That warfare can be dragged throughout history for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, even more than that, to a certain degree, instead of having to do that warfare. So it ends up looking like, certain battles. This month we're going to do one of the battles in regards to a certain warfare, that we've been dragging along for who knows how long. And that's one of those things where you can see them be able to feng shui it so that we can experience peace. instead of having to experience warfare. Again, imagine it'd be like this. Okay, so you imagine Germany, you imagine Great Britain. Great Britain, this is World War II. We're talking World War II. Great Britain, France, and the Allies, that they declare war. But instead of going to war, they just say, all right, so, we're going to have a battle a month and that's just what it's going to be. But then they decide not to do that anyhow. They don't do the battle a month anyhow, because there's other stuff to do. So they end up finishing in one battle a year. And, there's not this huge warfare that takes place, but rather there's like a battle spot that they meet. And then they put the Allies got their forces on one side, and Germany has their forces on the other. And, all of a sudden they go at it, and once a year they just do it. Imagine if it was still going on today, instead of it being over the war, and we're still just doing that one battle a year. It'd probably be like entertainment and all that sort of stuff in regards to it, because the way we can feng shui it. So instead of those certain bombings happening in regards to Great Britain, instead of instead of D-Day happening, it was just this sort of weird semi-quasi battle once in a while kind of stuff. And you'd have to understand, it's like, well, why would they do that? I mean, would Germany assign those accords? I mean, what happens if they press their advance? Well, again, what would happen in regards to it is that if Germany pressed the advance, or if the Allies pressed their advance, all of a sudden that warfare is not happening once a year, more so, but rather something else. Again, it's partially dictated for some of it in regards to how people respond, and respecting those accords in regards to having that peace and doing that sort of battle once a month or once a year, to be able to end it. Imagine that they do portions of the battlefield and eat every year. So like the next move that Germany would make, that we've already covered for the past 60, 70 years. Imagine if we're up to D-Day or something like that. All the battles since then that we already fought in a certain pitch, in a certain spot. And that's the thing of it. It'd be like, but would the same circumstances be met? But imagine they could set it up so that those circumstances would be the exact same in regards to those battlefields, those pitches, having one allotted battlefield, and we choose one spot in France, in one area, 100 miles, and we just we'd set up a certain kind of battle area where once a year or once a month. And this isn't literal, man. It's an example, good sir. I just thought of France. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that makes, well, all right, fine. You don't know why. Poland would work too. It's not funny. But it's that sort of thing where we'd see a certain kind of warfare instead of just happening, and then behind the scenes around certain physicals on this physical planet Earth, just constant battle and warfare for who knows how many years. There's ones like that. If they were to fight those battles, that in a certain spot, certain physicals would be like, okay, but that's like a decent sized chunk, 5, 10, 15 years of my life. It's just going to be seeing battle behind the scenes to a certain degree. And there's ones like that, and that's the case of it. Now, well, I am one of those who says finish the fight, because I think it's I don't, because not only that, but within the context of that sort of stuff, within the context of those single battles, yearly and monthly, some of it hasn't been respected. Some of it's been lies. So you take a look at it. Take a look at it in that room. Tell me that it's been decent all the way through. Tell me that it's been what it is. And how is it that I'm the one who has to say it? You should be saying it. Or, okay, then fine. You don't know why you point towards the banners. Yeah, you tell me. Has it been? All right, then fine. You don't know why. He knows. Well, you're from a certain area, Alex. I'm actually I am from a certain area where it would be respected. From a certain area where it shouldn't be respected as much as what some people insinuated should. All right. You don't know why. Why? Why? Oh, that's why. Okay. Well, okay, yeah, that is correct. Respect, huh? Well, okay. No, it's over there. Anyway, the idea remains, and it's that sort of stuff that's been happening at times, where a certain kind of forming up, where you could see certain spirits of a certain kind put on a uniform to be like, yeah, I remember I used to be part of these guys or whatever it was way back when, and they're in town and they're going to be fighting a certain kind of battle that's off of that warfare that happened whenever it was, continuing that sort of moving through that warfare in a certain time frame. Again, it shouldn't look that way, because if you look at all the battles in a row in a certain kind of montage, it looks like a certain kind. But if you put the years next to it, it gets well, there's a bit of a comedy factor, because that is the truth. It's like, wow, that is a long time for certain battles, but it shouldn't take away from it to a certain degree. The only thing that I have a feeling in regards to it taking away from is the results regarding that battle. And what if the battle results were already understood? Yes, if the results were already understood, then that would be interesting. I mean, for some of us over here, we'd be like, okay, if the results were already understood, because that would be for some of us. But some of it hasn't been understood like that, like some have. If those results, and that's one of those things where you can imagine that the results of the war had already implemented, because they already know who's going to win, and then the one side still has to fight however many times it does in the time frames that they allot. That's some of the spiritual warfare stuff that I'm talking about. And for some dimensional existences, they don't play it that way, and that's also it. It's like in a certain spot they went to war and didn't stop after that month or whatever it was. There's those ones too. We're looking at you too, Alex. You're looking at me too, huh? All right, you don't know why. Well, that'd be correct. You don't know why. That's what you did. You jumped in here because that's what it was. They chose some. That's all. Oh. Well, all right. All right. You don't give a shit about that. Some of it I don't. Some I don't give a rat's ass about for a reason. All right, fine. This is the case of this. All right, fine. You feel that way because these guys just won't do. This is the case. These guys won't because they're pissed off about this. And is that the case? No, apparently not. You do. Anyway, that's some of that. On the first, let's go over here. Google. Well, you don't. That's what it says. Some of you don't care. All right, you don't for a reason. Whatever. There was this mobster kind of feeling around me the early morning on the 1st of October, 10:01. It's been a bit of a symbol on my end. And it sort of reflects seeing what spirit guides indicated within certain content, in a certain manner, in a certain context. And it was, Operation 10C is one of those things that I kind of felt like there was something already in regards to that. When I put it into play, I kind of felt like there was a certain kind that came around me. And I feel like it was already, like, I put in the physical documents. It is located online. And it's one of those things to try and help multiple things. 2 Operation 10C documents, both different. And one has to do with, within certain content, being able to see what spirit guides indicate and focusing on what they say. And that's really, that's some of it. And it's one of those things to try and help, because I noticed within certain content, I noticed a certain kind of informational placement at times where I sort of looked at it, I'm like, where is, like, this is kind of how I feel about it for some of it. And it kind of felt like there was certain kind of spirit in a certain context that was utilizing our content on Earth-based and others fine spirit guides in a certain context, in a certain manner. And I was just one of those things I put into play with advocations, disclaimers, testifications, to try and help a certain direction, the correct direction. Well, that would be correct. That's how I feel about it. Yeah, so it does remind me of that to a certain degree. But early morning again, and I think there would be some stuff happening in regards to content this day, October 1st, as well as potentially beforehand, as well as after, where certain things were happening. And again, it was fairly silent on my end. And it's one of those tells, what am I not seeing? What am I not sensing? And what is taking place? And okay, well, that was correct. You didn't have to say that last comment. But no, that's how I feel about it. I go with what spirit guides indicated in the light. Well, I go with what spirit guides indicated in the light. All right, then fine. There's no problematic in regards to that with me. in the ways that me and spirit guides indicate in the original light. They're on the same page in regards to my process, Alex James Hislop, February 44, pertaining to what me and spirit guides indicate in the original light, the way me and spirit guides indicate in the original light. Okay, then fine. Because that was what you said. And yeah, some of it is partially based upon certain kinds of action and reaction pertaining. Again, if we see something take place in a certain kind of content, then all of a sudden there is a certain kind of mandate that potentially changes, or potentially just follows. Well, there's certain things take place. Sometimes it's based upon a certain action happening within a film. True. And not just film, but books, a bunch of other things. Some of it is based upon certain actions that, to a certain degree. All right, then fine. We do the same thing, Alex. And again, you when you baseline it on the quality of life, though, the quality of life, happiness, and safety factor, those three and others that mean spirit guides indicated, there's something that just doesn't look to be correct. All right. Well, all right then. Well, all right. I mean, that's basically what it is. Now, which side are you on? All right. You don't want to ask that guy, ask who spirit guides indicated to be true. All right. Well, this is the case of this. Like, why don't you? Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to see there. All right, fine. All right. There was a bit of a freak out in the early morning. I was a little bit upset. I don't mean to be angering. I don't mean to be upsetting. And one thing that started, that was a let know regarding, because, and I know it's a bit unfair when I say it, it's like, listen, when you're going to say it in regards to certain things, when someone else says it, fine. And there was others who did say, in a certain context, that, we would like a validity and a viability in regards to going a certain direction, that certain brimstone society and immorality culture that means spirit guides indicated, as well as other kinds, to a certain degree, that sort of stuff that I sort of, well, I said it in a bit of a negative fashion, but others didn't. And when there was a bit of a truth sort of, this needs to be, you work on this sort of stuff, people can go these routes. There's this sort of thing where some are like, look, I wouldn't mention certain things that had happened or events that had happened in a certain context if certain things could be figured out. There's also that sort of, well, no, that's it. Some of it has to do with recompense. Some of it has to do with, if you don't bring it up, then you don't get a certain kind of recompense, whatever it is, justice, whatever that be. And there's a vice versa in regards to it, is that if you don't bring it up, you get certain kinds of things too. So, staying away from certain events that took place that some do not want to hear about in a certain context was some of that culture. But I didn't see a certain kind of validity on my end in regards to it, partially by way of some kind of making it non-viable and valid, which shouldn't be a reflection in regards to others to a certain degree, but at times has impacted others' direction to a certain degree. Those who would go those directions, partially by way of this process and some of the impact it has, when you see an impactful process be affected in a certain manner, specifically in regards to viability, going certain directions and not bringing up certain events, and not testifying in regards to certain things, and not going certain routes in certain brimstone and immorality culture dislike, when that validity and viability gets affected, and that literally I can't really go the direction that some want me to in a certain context, as per what some have been trying to tether and change, and the impact regarding that and the perception regarding that really does matter, and it can impact certain things. So I do apologize. I don't mean to be upsetting about it. But it's one of those things that someone said they're working on, which is decent. It's a good thing. That's the stuff that some want to have worked on, because I do feel like that sort of glue has at times, for some of it, been affected in a certain manner. All right. Because that was also it. Oh, I fell asleep to wake up in a dream in a sitting circle. There was someone throwing beanbags, and I was looking at him from one angle. And then when I approached him, he turned old. When I woke up, they said my eyes, if there was crying energies from my eyes, it was said to have meant that some got harmed. It was insinuated as I woke up, though. I think some were trying to use it to create it to happen. Again, I woke up and I felt this energy, like wind energy coming out of my eyes, but like soft wind energy, almost as if like I was crying, not liquid, but rather something else. And they said that if my left eye, if I was crying, if there was energies coming out of that eye, there was something about it. There was something that I was getting attacked, and someone channeled through and said he was attacking me. And then I felt those crying energies or coming out of my left eye. So I don't know what was said, but they kind of insinuated that, you know, I'm not, like, I don't want to go after certain kind in regards to this physical, but rather others, you know, in other areas in higher life. But, you know, like, I don't know why that was said. I don't know if it was a smoke and mirrors, but it was sort of looked at from a certain kind of perspective. And they said that person with the beanbags, that they sort of insinuated that I caught him. That was one of the things. And it had to do with, by the time I caught him, we were old. And that was sort of what was insinuated. But I think that might have been aspects of process, not necessarily myself to a certain degree. And supposedly his old man, an elder, was in the sitting circle too, who was a little bit higher than everybody else, but he was sort of facilitating a certain kind of discussion to a certain extent. I don't know. I wanted to mention him because that's sort of what I noticed. But I noticed he was good. Like there was a good about him. And I don't know. They said it represented something. They said it had to do with the guy. Well, there's something about it. I don't know. I don't think you want to attack the guy with the beanbags. I don't know. Like there's something about it. I don't know. It's just all I'm going to leave it at. I don't know why. Like it's okay. Well, that doesn't help us too much. That doesn't, because that was also it. Because that was the truth. That's all. That's what it said. It said we're trying. That's also it. And this is what's interesting about this. This is what Alex is talking about. That sort of stuff that says that they're going to work on it, but then everything just goes back to normal when these talking points happen, and they're going to work on it in certain intervals or whatever it is. Okay then. We're saying okay then to what Main Spirit Guides indicated, but it's one of those things that is a bit of a difficulty. I think there's people who are working on it like throughout, and that's the true. Whereas then certain resources allocate in regards to certain kind of time frames to a certain degree in regards to fixing that sort of stuff. Another Hollywood spirit was around me too in a certain context. It's good stuff, but it's also on a bit of a serious note as well too. I and other spiritual guides are advocating for what Main Spirit Guides chose for us to advocate in regards to those that Main Spirit Guides needed regarding the smart education etc. for Main Spirit Guides, so Main Spirit Guides needed. Okay, go that way. Early on, I don't even mention that. You should. You don't know why. Early morning dream. I remember looking through forms, and I remember choosing a certain kind of Argonian form. I remember being like pregnant in regards to it, and I don't know what was happening. There was a certain kind of intimate worship or something, but then it was disturbed. The dream was disturbed, and then I woke up. Okay, pretty much. There was another person in the dream too, and I don't know who, but he was sitting on the can. That's what they say. He was in like a washroom or something. I don't know. Well, okay, that does matter. You don't know how much that mattered. Anyway. Yeah, but it was a stone structure. So, all right, it was a stone structure. All right. So that'd be why. That's what happened. I remember waking up and still remember experiencing certain things behind the scenes. And I did utilize a certain kind of dream manifestation in regards to trying to protect my dream self in a certain context. Like I remember like still feeling like I was experiencing the dream behind the scenes. There's those ones. And you don't know why. Because that's just what it is. That's what they said. Started writing down my advocations, the advocations that I'm creating daily in a certain context. And today's been lax, yesterday was lax, and even the day before was fairly lax to a certain extent. Or no, the day before, I don't know if the day before was. I think maybe the second was, but either way, I'll try and work on some advocations tomorrow and do some stuff to a certain degree. Yeah, there was a soothsaying that really hit home. um, there was also, I worked on, like, I sort of saw this sort of system try to be maintained and created in regards to regular actions. That sort of thing. It says that I do a soothsaying, I write fiction novel, I write a bit of my book, I do some advocations, and all of a sudden there's this reasoning as to why a certain kind can make it past a certain area to a certain extent. But I don't know. Something happened where I feel like something got affected, and it was just, I don't know. Because that's what they're saying. They're saying they're using your impact for a certain kind of endeavor. And I already do have Alex James Hislop and others to moderate camp power utilization information to a certain extent. And there's already the power facilitation information that means spirit guys need in regards to the spirit that means spirit guys need the women shows need. So I don't really see, what the problematic is. Yeah, my eyes would get attacked in the coming days. Actually, yesterday, the 3rd. October 3rd, this October 2nd, certain kind of eyes infrastructure would get attacked behind the scenes. I would feel like I got attacked in a certain manner. I don't really know what to say, but it's something to do with realism as well, realism in fantasy realms. There was a moment where I was a little bit upset, where I watched certain kind of speeches and I felt ashamed of being upset and argumentative and upsetting to a certain extent. But then, I look at certain things, I'm just like, I do care, but it's not that, like, it's not the reaction, whereas I don't give a shit. It has to do with, you look at something and say, regardless of being Canadian or not, I mean, when are you supposed to freak out? Am I supposed to be, like, kind and just be like I don't know, like, you look at certain things and there's just, I can cuss out anytime I want to in this life, and depending on how I do it, some guy would be okay with it. Some spirit up there be like, yeah, you know what? This is the thing of it. Well, okay. That was the thing of it. You'd have to throw up, but what happened to you, though? I think that my dimensional stimuli in regards to what's said to happen to me to be enough, because I feel like I did at times spiritually get attacked. I think that there was that sort of thing, and they there's something changing in regards to certain kind of past attackings on me. I'm wondering but that's also it. Is that the physical time frame is here, and those that are in line in regards to that is also it. So that tells me something. Again, it's like when something like a certain event, a spiritual event comes around me, it's like, yeah, this is from like 60 years ago, and that's why it interacted that way. That 60 years ago, you'd see a certain kind of interaction in regards to this process and something happening. But I still look at 60 years ago, and I look today, I'm like, that was still 60 years ago physically, and it's still today. So there's still something that took place. There's still something that happened. And the way some have been looking at it is from a physical time perspective. We talk about dinosaurs. We talk about cavemen. We talk about Aztecs. We talk about a bunch of different things. A huge one that they said was, that was correct, though. This is the case of this. That's the correct of it. So there's been some who have been trying to change a direction and get communications to the areas that mean spirit guys needed, at times that mean spirit guys needed, in regards to this process, that there's not really a reasoning to attack this place, not in the context that some want it to be. If his argumentatives, if his mindset changes and he does present himself in a cordial and kind way throughout this life, that somehow it doesn't warrant that amount more of attack and harm. So, those who hold it down in regards to argumentatives and not being attacked in regards to really do have a bit of a case in regards to some of that stuff. Literally being the difference, that's just, it can't be. Maybe it's just a case by case. I don't know, because you do. That was the thing of it. Well, it's not meant like that. Well, see, now this would be one of those things. Like, this is the kind of stuff that you need to explain. Okay, well, it'd be like that sort of thing where I'd stay away from utilization in regards to my case pertaining to those trying to safeguard, in regards to certain kind of doing argumentatives to a certain degree, that kind of staying away from certain subjects in which can help certain things. But again, there is an emphasis in regards to this life. There's an emphasis for a reason, because of some of the stuff that's happened, some of the stuff insinuated, some of the things talked about, some of the communications, energies felt, psychic attack, a bunch of different things, where I look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to cut through some of this bullshit, and I'm just going to go the way of spirit guides and the original light. And it's been that for a while now. It's been that for Like again, like there's been a bit of an emphasis in regards to 2019, but I talked about it in 2018. I talked about it in 2017. I'm going with what Mean Spirit Guides indicated, and there's even more emphasis these days in regards to going a certain kind of direction, because there's been advocations in regards to certain kind of self-mediation. There is disclaimers created physically, but there's already spiritual stuff beforehand anyway too. It's kind of the stuff that I, it really is. All right, you know why. They want to keep you away from the good. That's all. That's what they said. They said you're that. On the second and third, there was a certain kind of event taking place, apocalyptics, so said. Certain kind of apocalyptics and other dimensional existences, floods, bad weather. Was there other stuff? Certain kind of weather pattern apocalyptics was what was talked about. Someone saying it had to do with climate is that in looking upon a certain topic and subject, time, space, climate, is that climate would be one of those third ones. Again, time, measurement of moments and other kinds, space, area, that sort of thing. But then the third being climate, atmospherics, interaction. This kind of stuff that interaction, and some people would say interaction would be the third one, but I liked climate too. There was something about climate that I really dig. There was something about there, especially since it like sort of correlates, I think, in regards to certain kind of space. There's something about it. There's climate on planets, and there's just something there. But there is a climate in regards to space. There is. It's this cold, calm, therapeutic. There's something about it in regards to space, and it's one of those areas. And for someone, it is that. Just to let you know, that is scary. That somebody can look like put his head in regards to space and just feel like therapeutic, like he'd feel like healed in a certain context. But that's like we need some feng shui of like energies, like you put a placement of Mean Spirit Guides indicated, because that's also when man the smalls, yeah, the smalls. For God's sake. It's a certain kind, though. You can put a system there when he puts his head there. A certain kind of resource utilization is happening in a certain kind of context pertaining to a different kind rather than therapeutics within physical space itself. All right, fine. Something about Google as well. There was some talk of Google. I had this dream, and I remember seeing someone. I remember like meeting when someone said I was with Google on the 2nd of October, and I don't know why. I don't know what the tell was, but it kind of felt like I was like in one of those spaces where they're like, Google has that creative kind of just really well crafted, creative, and I don't know what it was all about, but I'm advocating for what Mean Spirit Guides indicated in regards to smart education, etc. Mean Spirit Guides needed. Other Mean Spirit Guides are advocating for the safeguards that Mean Spirit Guides needed to be thrown up where Mean Spirit Guides needed, the way Mean Spirit Guides needed. Okay, fine. Because that would be correct. They had you do this for a reason. And Google doesn't deserve to get attacked in regards to me mentioning a certain kind of dream or whatever it have happened. It just, you're not going to say it. No, I'm not going to say it because I do feel like it's one of those positive creativity vibes like that like I believe in. It's like this is what they said. Well, whatever then. I think they're good too. Well, that was why. You don't know why. Energy, climate, again, that's what we talked about on the third, something about, energy and climate. Energy economics talked about. There was energy comparisons, realism, hemispherics, comedy and story were impacted this day as well. Something to do with someone feng shuied it. Something when they looked at comedy, they looked at something where it was looking like certain kind of laughter. I think in regards to this process and certain physical earth-based was going towards something that was not good. That's what was said. I don't know if I believe it, but that's what was said, and that was partly why certain kind of comedy feng shui happened in a certain kind of manner. And then also story was looked at in a certain context. I think a certain kind of realism kind was around in a certain manner. I think there is good story. I think that Like I think maybe they don't reveal themselves a certain kind of good story at times, maybe because that when they come over to certain areas that they fix some stuff and just focus on not being seen in a certain context. All right, well that is correct. That was the thing of this. It's the real true. Yeah, so yeah, something was feng shui. Recovery reveals and reveals. There were some reveals that happened this day, certain kind, let know in regards to certain things. I don't know too much about it. That's pretty much all I know. So, um, moving and changing happening. There was a lot of movement dimensionally. I felt movement into different areas. I felt me placed into a different dimensional area. I felt certain kind of spirits taking shifts in regards to this process. I felt like something was happening in a certain regard. Something was forming up again. And I think some were looking at it from a certain context, but again, you can only go so far with that until you look, okay, well, that's really it. There we go. Or, well, you don't know why. It's like we're not supposed to look there. And this is why I have a difficulty with it. You do, because you do agree with that. You agree with this kind who says not to pay attention at all. And that's not fully true at all, because you're fooling yourselves into thinking that that's the truth of it. You don't think you have a horse in the race over there, that's your choice, but there is some of us that do. And it's not always over there, actually. All right, then fine. You don't know why, just because is that really what it is? You don't know why. You disagree with a certain mindset because you're not there. Yes. If I had approached it 5 years ago in that sort of sense, then that'd be a different story today. I'd be like, you know what, I don't know if I want to pay attention over there. I've been going the way I go, but I have seen certain things. I have been attacked in certain ways. There's been certain things that have happened. It's not going to heal in this life, even if all the way through I don't get attacked in a certain manner. For someone else, it will. For me, it will not. It will not be enough, because I will see whatever the hell happened, and no amount of good stuff going to be able to fully make that okay. It's one of those things. Why, when you promote immorality for myself and others from Insta Guides, it's when I promote immorality, well, I got to look at it and say, okay, so for some, it'll never be okay. I mean, one of those things where I can stack the amount of morality and whatever it is, all the decent things in regards to it, and it'll still be, for some of it, that sort of thing still took place in a certain context if it did. For some. Not for all, but for some. And there is. There is. The Psychic War Gamers content was created in certain spiritual tournaments when I defended myself took place. Okay, so something got set up here. I created the Psychic War Gamers, and it was twofold. And I don't know what this was all about, but I think we were going to try a certain kind of thing. One of the Psychic War Gamers episodes I looked at, and it's my gaming content, and I stream on multiple platforms when I'm doing gaming content in regards to Psychic War Gamers. I looked at it. It's this idea where when I'm reviewing this content before uploading it, if I was to do that, and also when recording it, a certain facilitation pertaining to interaction in regards to that sort of gaming content. It was one of those things where we looked at it, and it was a focus on intelligence and happiness. It was really amazing. There was this moment where somebody, I think, proved that you can go a certain way in regards to concept pertaining to certain kind of conflict and battle prowess. It can be even in practice stuff too. It doesn't have to be real. For some of it, there is a tactic where someone would say, if you were to do a pincer movement in regards to this moment in warfare, it'd be fairly decent. And that's because there is a thing like that where it's like, listen, just because people talk about tactics in regards to warfare doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing in regards to talking about warfare. So when we're watching this battle unfold, because I was playing Total War 3 Kingdoms, a certain spirit would lament upon why it is we could go a certain way in regards to intelligence. And it was beautifully done and amazing. It was a teaching point in regards to a certain kind of battle in a certain context, but also in other kinds too, I think. And it was the metaphorical was a portion of the battle itself for some of it. It was one of those things that I felt really, I thought was really, really well, really good to a certain degree. Why? Because that's how you feel about it. But then I also focused on happiness as well on my side too. There was while that was going on, there was also a happiness sort of look in regards to myself, in regards to what I believe in regards to understanding certain things. certain things forgotten, that I do care about people's happiness, that sort of thing, within the context of like someone attacks me spiritually and then me wanting to hit back. But then that remembrance that I care about happiness, that why would I attack back if I am of happiness in a certain context? And there was this reverence, but also zeal in regards to happiness that's been, yeah, well, I'm discerning the energies right now and trying to identify that quality, but it's been maneuvered, in a certain infrastructure, which that infrastructure, don't get it twisted. All right, don't get it twisted. Hey, don't get it twisted. This is the thing of this. All right, consent. Well, all right, then fine. That was what Alex said, but I'm not consent. This is the case list. That is how I feel about it. All right, you don't know why. Well, all right then. You don't know why. Don't get it twisted. All right, don't get it twisted. That's how you said it. You said that's your other dimensional selves. All right, now don't get it twisted. All right, now don't get it twisted. You don't know why. That's what you did here. You forced his hand. Right well. All right, right well, Alex. You don't know why, because the amount of times that he's been chirping and upset and angry in regards to God Sparks being located below, and this novel idea of still holding it down in a certain regard in certain areas is just enough, okay? That's what it is. All right, fine. And that's the case. That's ours right here. You always had to chirp someone out. All right, no, he had it. Well, that's the case of it, because you don't know why. I went the way Spirit Guides indicating the original line. How about proxy suppression, huh? Action attachments? I thought we were already talking about that. You don't know why. Because Alex agrees. This is the case list. You want to go home. I want my God Spark that's located below the thresholds to be recovered in the ways of main Spirit Guides need pertaining to those God Spark that main Spirit Guides need, the way which has need. All right, because you go with something else. You go with the old man. I went with the God Spark that main Spirit Guides indicated in regards to Smart Guide Kishing such main Spirit Guides pertaining to what main Spirit Guides needed, the way main Spirit Guides needed. I go with what main Spirit Guides indicated in the original line, the way main Spirit Guides needed in the original line. Don't get it twisted. I'm not trying to leave you with nothing. All right, fine. That is also it. We talk about that, and it brings it forth, and that's really it. There we go. And that would be correct, Alex. We facilitated this, is what it is. Is that the case? Well, if it's the case, it's the best thing I've ever heard. All right, well, no. Maybe top 100. It wouldn't make the list. It would not make the list? Really? All right. You know, maybe not. No. If you did it that way, then not. You don't know why, because that was why. Then you brought up that, and that was the case of this. All right, then fine. And I don't believe that there's just this sort of like, like we didn't know sort of crap that's going on behind the scenes. There's certain spirit that's like, my God, we saw it now. Now we got to, switch up or do whatever it is. For some of it, sure. But for me, for the God Spark that main Spirit Guides indicated, all right then. All right. Anyway, we did the Psychic Wargamers content, a recorded one, and about a third of the way through, they started insinuating certain things, like a utilization of my life in a negative fashion, in a certain kind of fashion where they were not really respecting the boundaries and what main Spirit Guides indicated in regards to smart education, etc. Main Spirit Guides, or at least trying to label it and feng shui it that way. So I responded with some defense works, prompting what main Spirit Guides indicated, and they placed certain erratic energy on me. We're going to have those clamps fairly, where like, oh my God, for freak's sake, whatever, it's just like there's certain things like that where you notice that there's a certain kind of incoherency try to be invoked in a certain manner, and it doesn't excuse just a bunch of people getting killed or attacked or like, is that really what's going to be said? There was incoherency, and it's like, I don't know if that, like, how does that fly? I'm sorry, but like, there's also a methodical in the mix, and some do operate within the confines of incoherency. So, first off, they started trying to berate, trying to attack in regards to certain kind of things, trying to label the content itself to be a certain kind. but it wasn't really that was upsetting. Even though that was upsetting, it was the upsetting factor in regards to getting a certain percentage in regards to all that is chirp me out in a certain kind of fashion, trying to get me to respond in a negative way. And I think it was more to do with my higher God spark in a certain extent, and other God spark to a certain degree in regards to certain kinds of conflict. Responding in an erratic sort of fashion, in a fashion we don't want to be responding with. But I did utilize certain kind of energies that night. On the content itself, I utilized truth defense, clarifications, and coherency. I also utilized bringing forth of energy, visualization, access, that sort of thing, looking towards a certain kind in being able to bring forth, manifest as some of it, deployment, multiple kinds like that, to be able to defend myself during this content in which I felt like certain conflict was arising. To a certain extent, there was multiple tells that that's what's taking place. And if, you know what, if that's what it is, then I think that it, finish the fight, dang you. Is that what it is? Well, okay. All right. You don't know why. Is that what it is? No. Holy crap. For some of it, it is. Well, okay. You don't know what. Then I would go outside and look at certain kind of cameras and footage, visualization, access, and then I would create certain kind of advocationals regarding truth defense, clarifications, incoherency. No, coherency. We already have advocations for incoherency. This is the true. I don't know, like 30, 60, 90, something, like 120, something like that. Physical advocations in the digital in regards to incoherency. But there's also other ones too, specific to this day. This was October 3rd, 2019, and that had to do with I think certain events taking place in regards to it. Another one was also in regards to reputational defense, explanational creation, and explanation construction, that sort of thing. There were specifics in regards. I just did it, 60 times 4, 60 times 6. About 10, 60, about 600 advocations, something like that, on the AJHD Defensives board. AJHD Defensive Board? I think it's the AJHD Defensive Board. No, AJHD Defensives Board, that's it. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking there for a second. And yeah, so AJHD Defensives Board on the October 2019 list, I would create certain kind of advocationals. Yeah, AJHD Defensives, October 2019. And there'd be a bunch of different ones that would be created. And some of it, again, I went outside and I kind of felt like there was a certain kind of trap some were trying to set, but then something went away, something didn't work, or something happened when I looked at certain footage. There was a bunch of other things that took place, and I went inside after the content. This was like I turned off the content and went outside, and then I did other kinds of defensive maneuvers, and then I went inside. Went into my room and just laid down. And when I was laying down, again, this certain kind of deployment was happening, certain kind of moves, card pullings, and actions taking place, where certain banners would emerge and a certain kind of conversation would come over here and be like, whoa, is this what's going to be happening? And some were trying to say that it was, well, there was tells that was in relation to some of Earth-based, but I don't know if it was. Again, though, like I want to be placed in the areas I made spirit guides indicate in the light. Like if it was up to me, I'd just be in one of those original light areas, moving 42 Franklin Beach Road, all over there, and that's what I would want to do. But I go with what main spirit guides indicate in the original light, and there is, what the main spirit guides of the nature on 42 Franklin Beach Road indicated matters greatly. I do go certain directions. There is certain ones I look at and I say, I don't know how I'm supposed to facilitate some of it. There is certain ones like that, and I'm wondering if maybe situationally, all right, fine. Well, whatever. That's what you said. You didn't look at the spiritual. There is spiritual ones too. There is spiritual stuff. In a certain context, there's some spiritual stuff here. You would take a look at it and be like, why is this here? What the hell? What the heck? No, why are you doing this? That is what you would say. Why? Because there's some spiritual stuff at times. And that's just all it is. That's the one you don't ever want to see. You see that, and that's the case. There's a couple things. Yeah, well, I'm not going to be bragging about it, I don't think. about someone saying that there could be. Yeah, but someone saying that, this is it, man. Yeah, that's what that means, I think. Feather. All right, then fine. Well, whatever. That's kind of like feather. This thing here. It's a little wood grain. It's a feather. All right. Well, whatever. I changed everything. Yeah. So, I know there's Women's Spirit Guides are advocating for what Women's Spirit Guides chose for us to advocate in regards to smart education, etc. Women's Spirit Guides pertaining to October 3rd, 2019. The Women's Spirit Guides needed. It was a bit of a ruckus. I don't mean to be upsetting, but I think one of the tells was, oh yeah, his interaction does matter. That putting it, because there was decent and he didn't have to respond that way. Again, if you're berating and there's harassing and there's that sort of thing taking place in regards to interaction, you can't expect someone not to respond a certain way at times. I don't know what some are expecting in regards to certain kind of placement pertaining to myself, but when there's a certain thing happening, I feel like I need to defend myself. Proxy suppression and action attachment really needs to be understood. My Main Spirit Guides information needs to be front and center if everyone's going to be sitting there saying, Alex James Hislop and others for Main Spirit Guides, how dare you utilize those actions to defend yourself during moments where you needed to think that you to be to defend yourself or whatever like that sort of thing. Are you happy? All right, yeah. Well, you know what? No. Anyway, the 4th, I would watch Joker 2019, and I don't know what to tell you, but there was some stuff on that. There was some stuff I saw that was just very symbolic and metaphorical in regards to this process at times. And I think there was a certain spirit that that felt that certain advocations and things of that nature and information creation was to be problematic. But the other thing that I saw was someone who had had enough. Someone who had enough in a system that didn't give a shit about him and her, and finally got to that point where it's like, you know what, fuck you. And then that's some of the symbolics and metaphoricals that I see. It's not just in regards to my process; it's in regards to others as well too. You can take a look at certain groups on Earth. There is a certain kind. There's a certain kind that is very serious, and is in interaction regarding certain things. Again, how physicals present themselves in regards to this physical earth-based sometimes is dictated by the spiritual around them. And if there's a guy behind the scenes who's dealing with like zombies day in, day out, and he's like experiencing certain kind of interaction where he feels like it's a Day of the Dead every damn day, you can see why that mentality impacts a certain kind, where they're like getting bunkers and guns and just a bunch of different stuff. And it's like, this is supposed to be a realism kind of thing, except that you have a certain kind in the mix at times that is making it not that. So again, placement, interaction really does matter. And when people start to snap and go crazy in regards to certain kind of, like as a psychic medium, I would note that spiritual interaction in regards to head area, can be and is influenced to a certain degree. Not that one, another one, a different one. I was bringing up a memory, and I don't want to use that one, but I've seen it multiple times. That one, that's the one. Oh, that is the one. That would be the one. Alex, that day for sure. All right, then fine. That's how he felt about it. That's why. That'd be why, Alex. You give a shit about those guys. Not really. All right, fine. That's how you felt about it. Well, that's how I kind of felt about it that day. Hell no. What were you doing around me? Are you kidding me? That day needs to be brought up more often. This was early August. It was like August 1st. Yeah, it was August 1st, 2019, and that's it. That would be why. That would be the case of this. You have no clue. Those guys are decent. It's not about that. It's about what you did to me. Well, that would be why. What they did to you, yes. Well, that was the case of this, though. That's the case. Alice wasn't looking at the locals that got forced to do that. No, I wasn't. Okay, then fine. Next time we come around, Alex, you see those guys, those that Mean Spirit Guides indicated, higher light, original light. Get one of those original light beings, just be here. I think that's it. It's like, Well, all right. Can't you experience that? Like, it's like, no, like not a lot of time. Well, that'd be why. Not a lot of time. You don't know why. That is correct. Well, that would be why, because that's always how you go with it. And that's just the case of this. It was that day. That day was messed up. This is one of those things where they maneuver a certain kind of spirit in regards to head area. That if you're not aware at times, like one of the things that saved me in regards to that sort of interaction is that I understand what some of it is, that I know that I'm able to cope, that I know that I can control myself. But even then, you could still see throughout that all me freaking out, having a mental breakdown. Certain spirit in regards to mine shoehorned high up in like a certain kind of attic area, so sad. And I'm higher up above now than I was then. And that's for true. All right, that is true. I should be. Well, all right, you should be. That is correct. You don't know why. Because it wasn't that he was looking at. No. Well, that's one of them. Again, certain kind of interaction. What exactly does it feel like? It feels like they move a small that is operating your body in regards to, and they throw him like off a bridge or something. And where you feel like there is like, when people go crazy, there's something about it. There's something interacted, and some of it has to do with the spirit and other dimensional. Sometimes it doesn't always have to do with the physical going crazy in regards to a certain process. And when you see certain physicals with guns and that sort of thing lose their cool, and not just lose their cool, but start to be violent, that sort of thing really does matter. And when it just starts to look like that, is that the look? You don't know why, because if that's the look, then that's it. That's the true. Anyway, I'm adding for my smalls in regards to myself and others from Spirit Guides pertaining to October 1st, 2019, as well as August 1st, 2019, to be given the resources and support. I mean, Spirit doesn't need the women, she doesn't need a different day, man. No, all right, no, it is not. That's how we feel. That's how I feel. I'm sorry, but that was the case of it. All right, well, that was the true. And they brought up Genghis Khan earlier. They did. Yeah, well, there's something about that. Trust me. You don't want to bring that. I'm telling you, there's something about that life that there's an unfairness variable there. You think that this is the case of this. I wasn't even looking at that, having a justification for doing that. Because that's what some people point towards, maybe back over there in that life. And remember, that life physically already happened here. All right, then fine. But because I wasn't even looking at them saying there was a justification because bad things happened to them before. And if you look at it from that perspective, all of a sudden, is that what it's supposed to be? Especially if there was a justification anyhow. I was looking at the kind of setup, the kind of interaction, the kind of influencing that was happening behind the scenes spiritually in regards to that life. When I read up on him, there was something there. I don't know what to tell you. Like certain spirit were influencing to go that way. Well, that's one. But two, he was a warlord, a leader, a national leader. Yeah, a certain kind. Because that's always what's lost. It's like you'd have some sort of king, some European king do it, and you go the opposite way. Would it be viewed the same way? All right, you don't know why. What way? We look at Rome like it's, well, all right. We look at Greece, Alexander the Great. All right, no, it's the true. And I do. All right. And they do. And I'm not. All right, well, I know I am not. This is the case of this. Well, they said that, though. I don't know, because you brought up 2 points. Those are big points. Yeah. And that'd be one of the things that I'd see on October 3rd is a certain kind of banner deployment. A certain kind of deployment. It wasn't just banners. It was not just banners. Some of it was concepts. Some of it was dimensional. Some of it was other kinds, too. There's other ones that I don't know about in a certain context. Anyway, I don't know why they tried to feng shui some sort of thing on August 1st, to a certain degree. Some of it had to do with like locals attacking me, getting a certain kind of fight between myself and locals. Maybe to vent. I don't know. I think maybe it was to vent. Maybe not. I don't know. And, what does that have to do with when I pass on and not so? What kind of, what if I was to vent about certain things down here, does that mean that those that would have come with me when I pass on don't? in regards to some of them? Because that's like for some, they don't want to. I want to go to the promised land. I am sick of this. Well, that is correct. You don't know why. I don't know. Look, they've said at times and insinuated that I might have been part of the Mongolian army in a certain context. I don't know in what context. I don't know in what sort of way. Well, that was why, because you do something later on. Well, that's my prerogative. That's my choice. Well, okay, you don't know why. I think from certain historicals, I think that certain people in regards to Earth-based would look at it and say, that would be decent. That's a good thing. Because that's also it. They try to come at me from a moral perspective, but, that makes no sense. All right, well, that would be why, because that's what they're going to say. Now, that was correct. I think Genghis Khan was good. That's the way I feel about it. You can even see certain moments later on in his life where he would start to approach certain things, I think, differently to a certain degree. And I think there's also disparities, what happened to him in regards to his soul, his spirit, in regards to being Genghis Khan. These are questions that we need to ask in regards to, well, different, right? You think of Alexander the Great, you think of Caesar, you think of the others. And there's certain things that had happened in regards to spirit, in regards to God's spark, that needs an answer. That needs some, well, I don't know if it needs an answer. I think some of it does. There. Certain unfairness. Well, okay. You don't know why, because that's what happens here. And that was the thing of this. Alex thought of it from current perspective, physical. Sort of. But we should think of it in regards to time frames that Main Spirit Guides indicated. That'd be better. All right, it would be better. That would be better. Anyway, just some of the stuff that I've noticed is that an influencing in regards to certain physicals in going crazy, I've had experiences where certain spiritual around me were feng shuiing that to have happened. Where I'd be in a moment where I feel like a certain, you think about Osmosis Jones. You ever watch Osmosis Jones? The mayor? Well, things like that, where they'd be, that mayor would be maneuvered off in a certain kind of manner, and you could feel a certain kind of craziness take place in other dimensional infrastructure and in parts of what you're experiencing behind the scenes, in other things where if you didn't have a certain kind of control, where I could see how that sort of stuff could take place to physicals who didn't fully understand, as well as other kinds too. There's some physicals who have a certain infrastructure to be able to safeguard in regards to that sort of thing. Anyway, and that's one of the things they've been talking about too, is that sort of thing where we took a look at the theme of Joker, and some of it had to do with that sort of thing that said that he had enough, and that he got angry, or not angry. I don't know if he got angry. I don't know. He had enough. And some people start to try to feng shui certain things behind the scenes, like a month ago, like third week of September, fourth week of September. On my end, they were trying to insinuate certain things, like I would try and hurt somebody, but I'm nowhere near as that. Not physically, and I'm. It's not like that. Again, when certain spirits start doing that behind the scenes with, if you take a look at the other Alex James Hislop diary entries, and you should, if you're going to be taking a look at that sort of thing, you can see the coherency within it. You can see the explanations, the psychictivity let knows. You can see a bunch of different things where it's just like, okay, well, if half has been what's insinuated, especially in regards to some of the negative in regards to him, then, maybe that needs to, well, that is being, I think, situated now. And that's the case of it. Well, that would be why. So it's one of those cards where it's like, well, if it's being situated now, pull this maneuver, as to him freaking out or losing control, because you're not going to have that much of a chance 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago, from now. If the argumentatives, if the upsetness, if some of the bad stuff is that was happening is done and not going to be happening, then that again, from a tactic perspective, you look at it and you're like, that kind of makes sense, because, well, because when that stuff's not happening 4 or 5 months from now, it's going to be much more difficult to pull that kind of card and say, hey, you know, you freaked out and tried to harm somebody behind the scenes when, wait a second, all right, well, well, that is correct. And we'll see if that's the case of it or not, because again, we looked at that events thing taking place, and it's like Alex didn't know about some of the stuff taking place. I mean, for somebody who never did. And it's that sort of stuff where, you know, is he still getting attacked at times? Is there others who are getting attacked at times? Because that was also it. There's some physicals who didn't know that certain things took place, and I understand that it's a crumb card, but it is still that sort of thing. It said that some of them did get attacked spiritually, and they didn't know anything about it. So I don't know what that, you know, what that entails or what that means, but you know, it's one of those things. I and others from Women's Fair Guides are advocating for what Women's Fair Guides shows for us to advocate in regards to this market phishing section for Women's Fair Guides pertaining to October 4th, 2019, the Women's Fair Guides needed. I and others from Women's Fair Guides are advocating for what Women's Fair Guides shows for us to advocate in regards to this market phishing section for Women's Fair Guides pertaining to October 5th, 2019, the Women's Fair Guides needed. I and others from Women's Fair Guides are advocating for the disclaimers, justifications, advocations, and other kinds that Women's Fair Guides needed. That for Women's Fair Guides needed in regards to the Alex James Hislop diary entry content, October 5th, 2019, to be displayed where Women's Fair Guides needed, the moments that Women's Fair Guides needed, the Women's Fair Guides needed. I and others from Women's Fair Guides are advocating for what Women's Fair Guides shows for us to advocate in regards to this market phishing section for Women's Fair Guides pertaining to the time frames that Women's Fair Guides needed, the Women's Fair Guides needed.